If you have needs, satisfy them, as if you have the same rights and means as the wealthy and the rich. So don't be afraid to satisfy them, multiply them. That's what they teach you now. This is Libertarian View, your source of decentralized and distributed information. Fyodor Dostoevsky was a philosopher, a journalist, and a writer in the Russian Empire, considered as one of the greatest classic writers of the fundamental literature of the West, author of books such as Crime and Punishment and Notes from the Underground. In this article, we'll deal with one of his greatest works, The Brothers Karamazov, which describes the misadventures experienced by a dysfunctional family composed exclusively of male members. Fyodor Pavlovich Karamazov, a man known for his unruly lifestyle, giving to all sorts of excess, a drunkard and a gluttony person, the owner of a lust-filled heart and a clumsy mind. A man who, according to Hans Hermann Hoppe, should be physically removed from society. This man, unfortunately, was a father of 4 children and brought them into the world only to suffer. 3 of them had their paternity recognized, and the other child, the result of a sexual abuse of a woman with mental issues, was raised as an employee in a Karamazov mansion. But don't be fooled, having a paternity recognized by Pavlovich didn't mean much in the lives of those 3 legitimate children, as they were all, from childhood, abandoned to their own fate by a father who only wanted to be drunk, eat a lot, and have sex with any possible women. Dmitry Karamazov was the eldest legitimate son, and unfortunately the one whose character most resembled his father. The second son was Ivan, a boy whose education was very European-like, and who was given to philosophy and the social sciences. He was also a nihilist, an atheist search for meaning, but who in his heart already assumed that there was no meaning for life. The third son was Alexei, a good and religious boy who lived under the tutelage of Padre Zosima in a convent in the Russian Orthodox Christian Church. And he was an authentic and fervent Christian. On the other hand, the son who was not recognized by the drunken old man was called Zmejkov, a young man who was more nihilist than his brother Ivan, but without formal education. His revolt against the world and its intrinsic inequality between individuals is remarkable. Dostoevsky is famous for his realistic and existentialist approaches to his novels. In fact, he is considered a great precursor of the existentialism as a school of thought. An existentialist approach is centered on the individual, their actions and emotions, and above all, on the anguish of existing and being a thinking being. It is rather common between people more given to reflection and studies to be more analytical and to have a pessimistic view of reality, to have that constant feeling of anguish at the complexity of life and human relationships. And maybe that's why most people prefer to flee from a more intellectual and analytical posture, preferring to turn on the automatic mode and not bother to go deep into the issues that surround them. Although it is in everyone's right to adopt this posture, this is also excellent for the rule of the state. Governments are organizations based on lies, injustice and manipulation, and as such, they are very comfortable with the fact that most of its citizens do not have any interest in better understanding the reality of things. And to those who eventually demonstrate an interest, the state acts to co-opt them as legitimizing agents. In the middle of the story in question, the character Padre Zosima starts to deal with the situation of monks in the Russian Empire around the 1850s, 1860s, which leads him into start reflecting about the progressive ideologies in vogue in Europe. Those same ideologies, whose core ideas were being imported to Russia by a considerable part of the high-born classes who went to study abroad and brought all sorts of crazy theories as if they were universal truths. At this point, Russia is very similar to Brazil. This sociological fact also occurred here and still occurs today, in which people go to study abroad, that they learn about various theories that in Europe or in the United States are just theory, but these people, like good mods they are, become attached to certain ideas and bring them back to Brazil as if they were indisputable universal truths. Note that even though Europe is traditionally a very left-wing oriented continent, something the US is becoming by leaps and bounds, there is still a considerable amount of pluralism between schools of thought and academic circles. While in Brazil, people like Michel Foucault, Jürgen Habermas, and Luigi Ferrajoli are considered gods and their ideas absolute, quasi-religious doctrines. Going back to the book, in the hook narrated before the article, we see a provocation about what is taught in Europe by the currents of the non-radical left and even by liberalism. And we all know well that liberal thoughts are the best friends of socialists, since they teach that happiness and supreme fulfillment could be found in the satisfaction of needs. Note that in this context, the term need is more desire than need properly, and that everyone should have the right to satisfy all their desires. We libertarians know that according to the private property ethics, you have no right to happiness. You have the right to pursue it, but not to have it. Furthermore, you do not have the right to satisfy all of your desires, because you will hardly have all the means to do so. But the state promises to overcome this paradigm with social rights and through institutionalized theft. It continuously promises to give what you need, thus guaranteeing your right to be happy. Let's look at an excerpt of the novel that mentions it. By interpreting freedom as the propagation and immediate gratification of needs, people distort their own nature, for they engender themselves in a multitude of pointless and foolish desires, habits, and incongruous stratagems. Their lives are motivated only by mutual envy, sensuality, and ostentation. To give dinner parties, to travel, to have carriages, titles, and slavish devoted servants is considered such a necessity that, in order to satisfy this need, people will even sacrifice their lives, honor, and sense of humanity, and if they cannot satisfy it, they will even commit suicide. The same thing is true for those who are not rich, but in the case of the poor, the inability to satisfy their needs and feelings are for the present drowned in drink. But instead of wine, they will soon quench their thirst with blood, for that is what they are being led to. I ask you, are such men really free? Excerpt extracted from page 393. As it has been said several times here in this channel, the core of progressive movements, of supporters of state welfare policies, and of those who ask for more economic regulation and taxes, of those who wish to switch the war on drugs for the war on the rich, both deplorable wars, is envy. The rich are envious of the millionaire is envious of the billionaires are envious of their peers, and the poor progressive is envious of everything and everyone while aiming to reach the top, even if that could be done only through theft. At the time the novel in question was being written, nihilist progressivism boasted God is dead, and in a positive world, this was a problem. Faith has always influenced the state law. Without faith, what defines what the law is? Although many would blindly accept a law as legitimate just because the state wrote it, historically speaking, people have always done so by judging the laws by their faith. So without faith, many young people gave themselves to the idea of live and let live. But as Hope teaches, live and let live only works if your neighbor isn't depraved nor rude. And proceeding with the argument, let us mention another excerpt from the book. If you have no God, what is the meaning of crime? In Europe, the people are already rising up against the rich with violence, and the leaders of the people are everywhere, leading them to bloodshed and teaching them that their wrath is righteous. This sentence may be found on page 395. Note that today's speech is not new at all. Centuries ago, it was already in vogue in the old world. Politicians inducing people to see the act of getting rich as a crime, and a crime that generates a right. the right of those who have not become rich to demand resources from those who have made it as a penance for their success. Not to mention the rich, such as Soros, Bill Gates, and the British royal family, who aid the state in this anti-wealth crusade. In the Brothers Karamazov, Dostoevsky introduces to the wealth and rich people of Russia, the same who own servants, the same who own factories where even children toil until death, the same who despise the people as uneducated and pitiable, the same that influence the government against any possibility of social ascension per se. There were the same ones who preached about scientism, who claimed that they wanted to reorganize society fairly, creating and developing it only with the use of reason. However, such discourse only concealed their will to remake society so that they remain at the top and that no one can get to the top without their blessings. And currently nothing has changed, as you can see by the progressive billionaires who give interviews to the New York Times, asking the government to increase the taxes as means of hindering competition and individual independence. Should everyone need the state's blessing to progress in life, the power of the financial elite is guaranteed, because in state capitalism there is no real division between the political and the business aristocracy. They are all friends of the king. The social state, as Bastiat would say, is the legalized theft. Furthermore, the welfare state is the promoter of all sorts of moral degeneration. Only the welfare state would grant their members the power to command that the masses start working and earning their daily bread, and after that, without a glimpse of hesitation or remorse, pass new bills, such as the Paulo Gustavo law in Brazil, demanding that those who are forbidden to work pay for the cost of the state with their taxes. In the meanwhile, progressive artists, who by the way benefit from some of those same laws, were banding together in parties and orgies, as we learned recently, just a few months after they were boasting the anti-agglomeration alarmist speech. Ultimately, Dostoevsky's hope was that, as written in the novel, the people will finally understand the atheist and defeat him, and there will be one Orthodox Russia. Unfortunately, the author could have never imagined that the Bolsheviks, the ideological heirs of the young Russian nihilists, would seize power in Russia and promote all sorts of barbarism. In this particular episode, the people got drunk on the blood of the rich under Lenin's orders, and for that they paid an unimaginable price. But he was right at the end. The Russian people defeated the atheist regime, and currently Russia is experiencing a revival of the Orthodox faith. However, there is still an autocrat in power, but it is a fact that the Russian lives today more freely than they did during the Tsar's era, and of course, than they did during the Soviet Union era. But of course, there is still hope that the state will collapse. And it won't be different in Russia. Anarcho-capitalism is the future. Soon, in another video, we will dissect the Grand Inquisitor, an essential part of the Brothers Karamazov book. Don't miss it. This article was originally written by Arthur Henrique, translated by Korea Konka, and reviewed and narrated by Vasily Pierokiev. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please hit the thumbs up icon below and share it with your social network. If you want to be notified about all the videos, hit subscribe and then the bell icon. See you soon!